Unbelievably, the United States now requires visitors to deposit up to $15,000 just to enter the country. Not to live or work, but just for a short visit. This is the new plan put forward by the Trump administration to control immigration by forcing tourists to pay a huge sum up front. However, the main issue is that this has led many people to stop choosing to travel to the U.S. With rising costs and increasingly complicated regulations, the travel experience in the U.S. has become more difficult than ever. And now, the situation has worsened even further as Canadian airlines begin to cancel flights to popular U.S. cities, as the number of Canadian tourists has dropped significantly. Tourism to the U.S. is on the verge of a serious decline. The U.S. is projected to lose up to $12.5 billion due to this drop, with tourist spending decreasing by 22.15% compared to last year. Instead of addressing the core issues, the administration continues to harm the already struggling tourism industry, much like charging admission for a party no one wants to attend. Just a few months ago, Trump attempted to ban Chinese students from entering the U.S., and the harsh international backlash forced the policy to be quietly rolled back. Now we are witnessing a similar scenario unfold. Zambia and Malawi were the first countries affected, while Mexico and several South American nations are also facing tighter restrictions, with the likelihood of additional measures in the future. While countries in Europe and Asia are making efforts to make tourism easier and more convenient than ever, the United States has chosen a different path. No more troublesome cash bonds, no more complicated procedures. Just an open ticket is enough. But why has the U.S. decided to close its doors to tourists? In this video, we will explore how the new travel bond works, why it is causing such serious damage, and what this means for the future of U.S. tourism. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. In early August 2025, the U.S. government made a surprising decision. Visitors from certain countries will now be required to deposit up to $15,000 just to apply for a tourist or business visa, especially B1 and B2 visas, which are typically used for short-term visits such as family visits, sightseeing, or attending meetings. The purpose of this policy is to control countries with high overstay rates. However, the requirement for visitors to pay such a huge sum before their application is even considered has made many people hesitant, leading to a sharp decline in the number of tourists visiting the U.S. Officials argue that this bond will help ensure compliance with regulations. But it is hard to deny that such a high fee will only increase the reluctance of international tourists. Many are gradually turning to other destinations, places that are not only more accessible but also far more welcoming. According to the U.S. Travel Association, the number of visitors to the U.S. dropped by 14% last year, while countries like Spain and Thailand have seen significant increases in tourism. This shows that rather than attracting tourists, the U.S. is inadvertently creating a huge financial barrier, making them choose easier destinations. The visa bond is not a new idea. In fact, the Trump administration proposed this policy back in 2020, but it was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with Trump returning to power in 2025, previous immigration proposals are being pushed forward once again. The bond is just a part of a larger strategy to tighten immigration and control tourism. Over the years, his administration has implemented a series of strict policies, such as banning entry, tightening visa interview requirements, and increasing visa fees. These measures are aimed at reducing the number of people entering the U.S., particularly from countries the administration considers high risk. However, along with the introduction of the bond, the government also announced a new Golden Card program for wealthy foreigners, allowing them easier access to the U.S. with tax incentives and benefits in exchange for a significant investment. This seems to create a clear divide. If you have money, you will be welcomed. If not, you will face enormous financial barriers. This policy not only creates inequality, but also sends a clear message that the U.S. is not truly open to all tourists, especially those who cannot afford it. If you cannot afford to pay, you will be faced with the requirement to deposit a large sum just for your application to be considered. This system is increasingly dividing the path clearly, creating two parallel roads. One for the wealthy, and another narrow one full of barriers for the majority of travelers. This raises a bigger question. Are these policies really meant to control the borders? Or are they simply a way to increase revenue under the guise of security? Let's take a deeper look into how the visa bond system operates. When visitors come from designated countries, U.S. consular officers may require them to deposit a significant amount of money, ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, just for their tourist or business visa application to be considered. This decision depends on various factors, including the frequency of visa overstays by citizens of that country, their travel history, education level, and the purpose of their trip. However, the final decision largely depends on the consular officer's subjective assessment, which may lead to a lack of transparency and fairness in the approval process. A typical example is from 2024, where more than 60% of B2 visa applications from Ghana were denied, despite the applicants having completed their documents fully. This raises concerns about inconsistency in the application of rules and assessment methods. And this doesn't stop there. These visas are highly restrictive. They only allow a one-time entry, with validity lasting just 3 months, and visitors are usually permitted to stay for a maximum of 30 days. Moreover, entry is only allowed through 3 specific airports, making travel complicated and restricted. Although the deposit can theoretically be refunded, there is no clear process on when or how it will be refunded. The U.S. government's slow and cumbersome administrative system leads many to worry that they may never get their deposit back. This policy not only represents strict control, but also sends a very clear message. If you don't come from the right country or can't afford it, don't expect a warm welcome from us. For many, this is not just a barrier, but a strong statement of distrust. In fact, this policy is causing negative reactions from the tourism industry. For example, travel companies in Vietnam and Thailand have reported that many clients have canceled U.S. tours and switched to other destinations such as Japan or Europe. One large company, Via Travel, stated that the number of clients booking U.S. tours dropped by more than 25% in 2025. Industry experts believe this shift could lead platforms like Expedia to see a reduction of up to 20% or more in Southeast Asian tourists, as customers search for more friendly and affordable destinations. The implementation of this visa bond policy is not only a major obstacle for tourists, but also pushes the U.S. further away from rapidly growing travel markets. This change is causing a wave of concern in the U.S. tourism industry. Hotels, travel agencies, and tourism businesses are sounding the alarm as the number of tourists continues to decrease. The requirement for this deposit could make the situation worse. Currently, this regulation applies to 23 countries, but this number could quickly rise, with predictions suggesting that up to 50 countries could be affected next year, and the number may continue to increase in the following years. If this trend continues, visiting the U.S. might soon require a deposit, even just to take a picture in Times Square. The issue is not security, but control. This is how the U.S. uses money as a tool to decide who gets in and who is excluded from the country. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. The U.S. government expects this program to affect around 2,000 visa applicants during the trial phase. If all of these applicants pay the deposit and then receive it back, the government will temporarily hold around $20 million. However, this doesn't really have much financial significance. This is not a revenue source for the government, but merely a temporary amount of money. And if tourists comply fully with the regulations, they will get it back. Essentially, the U.S. is just holding cash like a cautious host, watching to see if guests will damage their property. And all of this is only effective if visitors complete the paperwork and request a refund. Moreover, the operational cost of this program is not insignificant. Adding forms, processing payments through systems like pay.gov, and increasing the workload for consular staff are all factors to consider. According to the Federal Register, just the cost of processing an application costs about $47.60 per person, not including security and other administrative costs. Therefore, overall, this policy is not a smart financial solution. It doesn't bring benefits, but just creates more confusion and inefficiency. The tourism situation in the U.S. had already been grim before this visa bond policy was implemented. Since 2017, international tourist arrivals in the U.S. have dropped significantly. The reasons are no longer a secret. Stricter entry regulations, demanding interviews, longer waiting times, and an increasing visa rejection rate have made the visa application process more difficult than ever. Now, with the additional deposit requirement, the situation has worsened. A real-life example is a family from Indonesia who planned to visit relatives and travel in New York, but canceled their trip after seeing the enormous deposit requirement. Instead, they chose Japan, where the visa process is much quicker and easier. Travel agents in Asia and Africa have also reported cancellations of U.S. trips. Instead of going to Disneyland or attending a conference in New York, many families are opting for other destinations. Countries like Canada, Europe, and Southeast Asia are benefiting from this shift as the U.S. gradually loses its appeal to international visitors. According to the U.S. Travel Association, high costs and restrictive policies have made the U.S. one of the most expensive countries to visit. For travelers from countries like China, Nigeria, India, or Haiti, a typical trip now can cost nearly $20,000, not including hotel and meal costs. The financial damage from this policy has become clear. The U.S. economy is expected to lose $12.5 billion in international tourism spending just this year. Industries such as airlines, hotels, restaurants, and small businesses dependent on tourism are facing a severe shock. But the big question remains: why take this approach? Why force tourists to pay an enormous deposit to enter the U.S., while still being closely monitored and facing the risk of denial if problems arise? While the government focuses on building financial and administrative barriers, the lives of communities dependent on tourism and immigrant labor are slowly becoming paralyzed. From large urban areas to small towns, places once considered economic centers are feeling a severe shortage. Hotels in Florida lack staff, restaurants in California have to reduce working hours, and shops in small towns in Michigan are closing down. This situation is not only due to a labor shortage, but also a decrease in the number of tourists and immigrants, who were the driving force behind the rural and small-town economies. Immigrant labor, foreign nurses, and international tourists play vital roles in maintaining essential services, from cleaning hotel rooms to harvesting crops. However, now they are being denied or unwilling to come to the U.S. areas like Texas and Georgia, which rely on labor to harvest crops, are facing a critical shortage. Famous tourist centers like Orlando and Las Vegas are losing tourists, with a significant decline in numbers as tourists shift to other destinations. This not only impacts the tourism industry, but also puts rural healthcare systems at risk due to a shortage of healthcare staff. Notably, many of the areas suffering the most are the ones that have pushed for stricter immigration policies. This shift has directly affected communities that once supported tightening measures. This change reflects a painful reality. Much of America's development has been built on a foundation open to labor, talent, and ideas from all over the world. That's why the U.S. was once the dream country for many, not just for the opportunities, but for its openness and diversity. However, recent changes, with increasingly strict immigration policies, are gradually dulling that American dream. In 2025, this shift cannot be ignored. Major international airlines have started to cut or cancel flights to the U.S., primarily due to unstable travel demand, high operating costs, and a decline in business travel activities. Flights from Latin American carriers like Avianca and LATAM are also reducing their routes to major U.S. cities, such as Miami and Dallas. While rising airport fees and a weakening U.S. dollar contribute to this shift, the biggest cause comes from the current political and social instability in the U.S. The decline in flights not only affects airline revenues, but also negatively impacts the local economy, reducing business opportunities and limiting growth. If the U.S. continues to treat tourists as a threat rather than an opportunity, the American dream will truly lose its meaning. This change not only affects the economy, but also reshapes how the world perceives this country. Therefore, if we do not change our approach, the U.S. will gradually lose its position as the world's leading travel destination. Let's reflect on this and better understand the decisions that could change the future of U.S. tourism and its economy. Don't forget to follow and stay updated with the latest news from us. See you in the next posts.